Thank you all. So yeah, without much ado, if no one has any questions, oh, I see in the chat, we do not currently have a topic for botany now. It's getting sorted out. So if you check back in the calendar by October 1st, I believe it should be sorted out. Sorry about that for botany night, just a bit of scheduling conflict. So without further ado, tonight is a marine biology night, and I am your new host. And I will be your new host for a while. Thank you so much to Phil Lambert for everything you've been doing. And yeah, so this picture makes me laugh because I look literally like a salty sea dog. So I am a marine biologist, and I wanted to share that photo. My name's Heidi Gartner. I'm a deep sea biologist with the Royal BC, or I was with the Royal BC Museum. I am with Fisheries and Oceans Canada. I'm going to give you a quick intro to my biology background, and then the talk tonight is actually about an expedition we did this summer, and we were diving with the remotely operated vehicle ROPOS, and it collects incredible imagery, so I figured this is the perfect group for that. And then I just wanted to highlight that a lot of the content from the talk isn't just mine. My boss is Dr. Charisse Dupree at Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And then we also have so many fantastic collaborators as well. So a little bit about me is, you know, everyone has this incredible story about them being a child and becoming a marine biologist after, you know, tons of time spent on beaches and having this, you know, innate connection. That's not my story, and it's actually very strange in the sense that I had never seen an ocean when I decided to be a marine biologist. I was growing up in Ontario, and there was this show that was produced to try and encourage students to get interested in science and math. And it was about people on a boat studying whales. And I thought, you can do that as a job. And I got hooked, and I said I was going to be a marine biologist. And so I did end up seeing the ocean before I came to school for it. But I remember being at University of Victoria, and the first class that I had, someone plunked this strange animal down in front of me. And I know I've seen it before. I know it belongs in the ocean. I know what it is, but I was put on the spot. I couldn't even think of the name of what this is. And I'm not talking about the scientific name, but like the common name, an urchin. I hadn't even had that much experience with the ocean. I had just always thought of just whales, and I was immediately hooked in the invert world. And, you know, by the end of that class, not only could I say the scientific name, I could know its entire anatomy. I know what it eats. I know its mouth parts. I've dissected one. I know how they reproduce. I know the effect these can have on kelp forests. You know, it was just an incredible year, and I was hooked. And so ever since, I've had a real passion for invertebrates. I went back to school after my undergraduate degree and got my master's in invasive species. So I was studying animals that come in on fouling structures, so things that would like grow on your boats, and looking at the communities there and looking for non-native species coming in that could have havoc on our coast. After my master's, I did a few different contracts, but then I went to the Species at Risk program. This is a really fulfilling position. We're, you know, involved in using the Species at Risk Act and the Fisheries Act to try and protect and conserve at-risk species on our coast. But I definitely was in more of a management policy position and was missing science. And actually, they're not funded on permanent basis, the Species at Risk program. So I had an opportunity come up for me at the Royal BC Museum, and I was so excited to take it. And I was the invertebrate collection manager. So invertebrates are the animals without backbones. I was basically a librarian of dead things in jars. This is me with like my stacks and stacks of dead animals in jars, and they all have data with them. I actually found it really cool. I got to work with cool people like Claudia and Darren. A lot of you know them from the board and membership. Definitely reach out to them if you want to join us after today. And I got to go around the province. Yes, I worked rain and shine, and I got to communicate science with people. It was a really good position. But I started partnering with the Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Deep Sea Ecology Program, and I had another moment that was one of those, oh my gosh, well, it's funny because it's an urchin, but we accepted donations from this program, and they also show videos of their dives. And I saw this urchin and I went, what is that? Like, that is an urchin with hooves on the bottom of that. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. And I was able to communicate with the team. They were able to collect it. Turns out it's the only second collected specimen for all of the Pacific. We had to send it to California for an expert to ID it. It was just so cool. And I was immediately hooked on the deep sea, and it's an exciting place to study for sure. And I think I just wanted to give you all that background because I am going to be hosting for the next year. And also because I feel like I have really big shoes to fill. Phil Lambert was the curator at the RBCM. I've known him for a while. He's an expert in echinoderms, and he's been giving us so much of his time over the past few years. So I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Phil and all he's done for the society. And yeah, it's big boots to fill. So moving on to this summer then. I get the amazing opportunity to study the deep sea, and how that works is that we tend to go on these expeditions. So these expeditions are, we go out on Coast Guard vessels, mostly the John P. Tully, you can see it here. And we study the deep sea using either cameras or these things called remotely operated vehicles. So in this image here, this yellow boxy weird thing is the ROV ROPOS, the remotely operated vehicle ROPOS. And we send it down and it's tethered to our ship, and it sends back all the imagery. So it's got amazing cameras on it that are sending us back imagery. It's got this long arm that you can use to collect things and grab things. It's got boxes to store on it. This little cylinder up at the top. I hope you all can see my mouse that I'm moving. It collects water, so it's a Niskin bottle it can fire. And yeah, we use this to study the deep sea. It's a very useful tool. And we actually get to stay on board the vessel. So this third image here along the bottom is what it looks like in the control room. So there's a couple pilots, a navigator, and the science staff directing the dive. And they've got all these really cool technology available to them to control this vessel under the water and move it around to do science. It's really cool. And the last image is that in studying the deep sea, I mean, it's not an isolated entity. You're still connected with everyone or with the ocean around you. So we do oceanography in and around these really cool features that we study in the deep sea. And the expeditions are led by Fisheries and Oceans Canada, but they are a partnership. So we have we partner with the co-managing nations of marine protected areas along our coast. So for us, that's the Council of the Haida Nation, the Nuu-Chah Tribal Council, Quetzino and Pacheedaht First Nations, as well as Ocean Networks Canada is a big partner. And we have endorsements from Challenger 150 and the United Nations Ocean Decade. I have one person saying that they don't have any images. I'm hoping that's not the same for everybody else. Anyone else is having that, I can try and restart maybe. If Phil, can you just let me know if you're able to see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So Carolyn, I'd maybe recommend just restarting the program, and it should let you back in, and hopefully the images will share. Yeah, so I'm a deep sea biologist, and my job is to give science advice to the government of Canada for the protection, conservation, management, and monitoring of the deep sea. And so we use these really cool tools, we send them down, and I'm going to show you lots of cool imagery, but I am going to let you know about some insights that we get from these expeditions, and a little bit of science. I'm not going to do a lot of, analysis for you, but just some insights that we share that really have implications for conservation. This just happened this summer in May, June, and then we actually went out again later in the summer. So very preliminary, we haven't done much analysis, but just some of the things that we're finding from our work. So this little greenhouse here is basically Victoria, where most of us are based. welcome to those who aren't. And we take out the John P. Tully. And this expedition, we went out looking at a few different environments. Along the west coast of Vancouver Island, we were looking at different cold seep habitats. I'll describe what that is. We went up to just south of Heidi Gartner to look at a seamount with a deep sea nursery ground. And then we went out into this large polygon that you see here, this black line. And this is a proposed MPA. It is the proposed Tangwan Hutchquecook Sea Geese MPA. It's a large offshore marine protected area that would protect a lot of our really cool deep sea features. And so, as I said, my job is to provide science advice about the deep sea for conservation and management. And what we tend to do, because the deep ocean is so vast and so big, is that we try to focus on ecologically and bioecologically significant areas. So we can't protect the whole deep sea. Some of the deep sea, I get it, you go down, it's mud, it's not that exciting. So we try and highlight the really important areas where it's very important to protect. And to be an ecologically and biologically significant area, you have to meet at least one of these criteria that's in this list below. And it does go through government, these are agreed upon now by the Government of Canada through Fisheries and Oceans Canada, but it's also a United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity standard. So this standard actually now exists around the globe. And it usually, when you're triggered that you have an EBSA, it's usually triggers some sort of management action, varying again around the world and the status and that sort of thing. So an EBSA, or an ecologically, biologically significant area, EBSA, we sometimes call them, they have to be unique or rare. And you have to prove that. You have to prove it has special importance for life history stages. It must support some sort of endangered or declining habitat. It has to be vulnerable or fragile or have low sensitivity. It has to be biological productive, have biological diversity, and have some degree of naturalist. And there are definitions for this. I won't get into them all for you, but the very cool thing about the BC coast is that we have a bunch of EBSAs. It has to do with our small tectonic plates. We have the world's smallest tectonic plates. But basically, we have 4 different categories of EBSAs that we have in our coast. So we have seamounts, which are mountains that are underwater that are over 1,000 meters tall. So most of these are extinct volcanoes that are underneath the ocean floor, and they have to be at least that minimum of 1,000. Many of them are more, but to classify as a seamount, they have to be 1,000. Next, we have hydrothermal vents. These are very productive ecosystems that are off of crazy chemicals, but basically it's where down in the seafloor, the seawater gets superheated by magma. It gets lots of minerals in it, and it shoots back out, and it's up to 400 degrees Celsius. And believe it or not, life likes that and can live there. And then we have cold seeps, which are where methane bubbles out from the seafloor from below. And then coral and sponge habitat, where there's lots of gardens of these 2 animals, and they're very fragile and long-lived. They're EBSAs as well. And so I did speak last year, and I apologize, there's going to be 2 minutes of overlap for sure, but it's just an important point to go over. But so seamounts are actually ranked by those EBSA criteria as high or medium on everything. So they are very important EBSAs. And what's amazing about seamounts is when this program started, the deep sea biology program at Fisheries and Oceans Canada, they knew about 20 seamounts. So this is just 7 years ago in 2016. We now are at 65 seamounts in our water from putting in concerted effort into mapping and studying these areas. That's a huge difference, a lot of EBSAs. And one thing that I'd like to draw your attention to here on this map is that that's proposed MPA will actually encompass quite a large amount of our seamounts, as well as the Skangan Kingless Bowie seamount. MPA up to the north has 3 of our large seamounts as well. And so our job is to provide advice. So, hey, these are really important EBSAs. They're here, but here's where they're concentrated. But also we're trying to answer questions about them. So now we know that we have 65 of them at least. We usually discover new ones every year. I'm not sure if we did this year, and that was the first year of all the programs. years that we might not have found one. So how do we kind of think about approaching management or classifying or using this data? My colleagues, Sharice Dupree and Tammy Norgard, they tried to come up with a way of classifying them so that they're similar, and they came up with 7 different classes within our waters. And this has to do largely with how deep the summit is, so the top of the seamount, what depth it's at, how much productivity is in the area, how much like natural food would then fall down, and how much oxygen is in the water. And that corresponds roughly to these different depth zones as well. These are very generalized patterns, but we have really low oxygen waters in BC. And so animals living on these seamounts pass through different levels of oxygen. And one of our jobs is we're trying to, on top of this rough classification, see if we can tell a story about our animals and like where we expect to find them and when. And I just have to say, the thing that we're finding right now, so we're trying to do things like species distribution modeling, where you take information from the few seamounts you've been to. So we visually surveyed 21 of them, I think it is. And you try and apply that to measurements that you know on other seamounts. And it's hard because all of our seamounts are actually really cool and really unique and very different. I see someone's asked in the chat, so how did the seamounts originate? So most of the seamounts are actually old or ancient volcanoes. So they come up where we have really small tectonic plates. We have a lot of pressure, and it's basically where the magma is coming up out of the water, creating the mountains, just like you would kind of on land from those sorts of like explosions. We do have some seamounts which are called mud volcanoes, and I'll talk about them a little bit later, but most of them are ancient volcanoes. And the difference between a seamount and, say, an island formed volcanically or something is that the seamount can't quite penetrate the surface of the water. Yeah. So yeah, we're finding that animals are just so variable. So one of the things that we did this summer is we went back to even this picture that we're showing on the top left is on either sides of the top of this super volcano. It's called Explorer Seamount. Just one side, you get these crazy sponge gardens. And on the other side, you get these very weird coral like fields. And one of the things we wanted to do is, okay, we're trying to find ways that we can figure out where animals will be consistently across these seamounts. Is can we follow the summit of the seamount and see what we can when the transition is, what are the different features, and it all varies depending on currents and orientation and seafloor type. And again, just to give you an idea of this, like I feel like Dr. Zeus must have come to the deep sometimes. Like this is literally a very strange but cool habitat. What you're seeing here is all sorts of glass sponges. So these animals make their bodies out of glass, and they build up into these noodle shaped things, and they're filter feeders. They filter food from them. What's really cool is that they're ancient. They're usually really old. Glass sponges grow really slowly. So something, 2 meters tall is probably 200 years old. And when they fall, their glass actually just stays on the sea floor. So unless it's disturbed, so it can create all kinds of habitat from different animals. So I just wanted to show that because I can't get over sometimes about how strange the deep sea world is. And then just on the other side, literally not very far away,
help us get a baseline information of what lives here.
Evidence of this, what we were talking about, volcanic activity. So you see these big black billowing rocks, those are called basalt, and that's from the ancient volcano erupting. That's like the cooling basaltic magma cooling. And on them we have these long whip-like corals, and this side of the seamount has just like fields of them. And you're also seeing a black coral there and a squat lobster and anemones. And it's just incredible when you send cameras down into the deep sea, we find something new almost every time. So yeah, I just wanted to share, we did do some research this summer on seamounts. Explorer was one of our main ones. And we also returned to see that seamount to a site we'd been to once previously before. And what we're doing is, for that monitoring component of the science of ice we're trying to provide, is we're trying to return to areas. So trying to go back to them and see what kind of change is happening over time, largely related to potentially climate change and any other factors. So another habitat type that we went to are called hydrothermal vents. And I'm going to share, yes, some cool imagery that we found and all that sort of thing, but 3 kind of just immediate kind of insights that we're getting lately from these expeditions. And again, they're just kind of like preliminary findings, but some of the advice that we then think about how we can pass up to management and to the government to provide advice. And so the hydrothermal vents, just a reminder, these are really superheated water. They create these really crazy structures underwater, and it's actually changed the way that we understand life on this planet at hydrothermal vents. Because down in this deep, really cold, extreme environment, here comes out this like super toxic, mineral rich, super hot water. Yes, it creates these hard structures for animals to live on, but how are they thriving? How are they living? And part of that is actually chemosynthesis. So instead of photosynthesis, which is using the sun's energy, they use chemical energy to create the food web, and it's all based on bacteria. And so up until we discovered hydrothermal vents in the 80s, late 80s, we thought all life on this planet originated from the sun, and actually it can originate from chemicals now too, which is changing everything from, you know, how we study science on this planet, but actually how we explore potential life on other planets as well. So maybe aliens look more like bacteria or something like that. Hydrothermal vents are also highly ranked on all those criteria that we discussed earlier. We do have about 35 vent fields within Canadian waters. This number hasn't changed a lot since our program's discovery. Again, the entirety of the 35 will be protected by the proposed Tungwan Hutchkick Sea Case MPA. This is really a unique opportunity too, because worldwide we are going to be something like getting close to a quarter of all the protected hydrothermal vents worldwide, which is really neat. And there's no bottom contact, no mining allowed, or for gas exploration. I just wanted to highlight down here at the southern end, this is the Endeavour hydrothermal vent field, and this is a really well-studied place. Dr. Verena Tunnicliffe and colleagues at the University of Victoria discovered hydrothermal vents in Canada, and then set up a really intensive and amazing research program over the years. And now Ocean Networks Canada has a cabled observatory out here, so it's monitored year-round. Some of the gaps, though, are that our program is now trying to fill. We did a lot of work on seamounts, I'll admit it, in the first few years. We're trying to shift now to looking at other things. And some of the other areas of the hydrothermal vents haven't been explored. So we've been going to the more northern ones here and trying to explore some information there. So some of our findings are that we need to really update some of our habitat characterization. This here is West Valley. This is one of the sites that has only been viewed once before us, and it was way back in, 30 some years ago. And the camera technology was not very good. So they tried to characterize the site, and we returned this year, and essentially it just highlighted to us that we really do need to explore more and not assume that hydrothermal vents, everything is known. We did not find any active venting, so none of that super billowing waters or anything like that. We also did find that maybe it was hydrothermally active at one point, because we took rock samples and we sent them off to colleagues. This is what one of those chimneys would have looked like, but this was one of the only ones we saw. And also their camera quality wasn't that good about 30 years ago when they came to this site, because they kept describing white objects that they thought maybe were anemones, and we went down and we couldn't find anemones, but we found tons of glass sponges. So just important to update site characterizations. And really the next step is trying to figure out, okay, when was it hydrothermally active? What's the context of how long? That sort of thing. The next is there's this kind of ideology that goes around that the deep sea isn't really affected by climate change, and we really need to change that. So discoveries in our program, again, this was led by Charisse Dupree and then oceanography colleagues, but actually 34 of our 35 vent fields are very vulnerable to climate change. So they already exist, these hydrothermal vents. This is what one more typically looks like when it's really hot, that there's that shimmering water. It creates these towers, and then bacteria and all these animals living around it. They already live in like a pretty low oxygen zone. And what Charisse and colleagues have discovered is in the past 60 years, by studying data at Line P, that our ocean has already lost 15% of its oxygen already. And that ocean acidity is increasing. And so they are 34 of our 35 sites already fall within waters of reduced oxygen. We also have learned that vent fields are really dynamic places, and we already sort of knew this, but this summer hit home that they're even more dynamic than we might think. And this has really important implications in the context of deep sea mining. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard, but there's a big push to mine our deep sea for minerals that are in our deep sea. And one of the things that people are starting to say is, oh, we're only going to mine inactive sites or extinct sites where there would no longer be venting. There's no longer these cool habitats. So this time we went to Explorer Ridge, and we were exploring based on the definitions of Jameson Gartman, areas that would be considered active, so lots of fluid coming out. Ones that are inactive, you don't really see much fluid, but it's pretty close to a heat source still, and then extinct. And what we were finding is that, for example, this little mound here, you can almost tell yourself, even if you haven't really looked at hydrothermal vents, that there's a change, something's happened. And so this was expected to be extinct site, and it is now completely active again. So all of a sudden we're having this hot water venting up. It's creating this structure. It's created this huge chimney already with the minerals precipitating out and creating that structure, and the bacteria is growing up in and around it. And as you can see in the background, there's just the kind of bare basalt, pillowing lava basaltic mounds of rock with carnivorous sponges on it and different things like that. And we also went to areas that were supposed to be active and were turned off and inactive. So anyway, it's important essentially to go back and classify different areas. And this is something that we're trying to pass up to management, and that we have to really, as a global society, agree on what's extinct, how long it's extinct, what the context of extinct is before we even consider mining. And again, mining will not happen in Canadian waters if this marine protected area goes ahead. It protects from exploring for gas and minerals, but there are areas beyond jurisdiction of countries and in the open seas that could have catastrophic cascading effects for the world if they are mined. So these are important discussions to be having. I'm going to share with you a little video here that I'm going to ask, please no pictures or sharing, and I'll have to edit the video after that we're recording, but hopefully you can all hear this. I'm going to try turning up my volume. Here,
An extraordinary discovery unfolded beneath the surface of the waves. Around 1,800 meters deep in a vent field previously thought to be extinct, we discovered a brand new, powerful series of hydrothermal vents. This area was pulsating with vibrant life. I am honored to announce the vent area name Kwakina, meaning hot rocks in the Haida language. It's a proud moment for Haida Gwaii. We share another deep sea area with a special name to pass on for generations to come.
I really hope you're all getting the sound. If someone wants to give me a thumbs up or something, but just to share that we did discover new hydrothermal vent sites, and we had colleagues aboard from the Council of the Haida Nation. And so one area is called Kwakina, hot rocks in the Haida language. We also partner with the New Chalmers Tribal Council, and in another area is getting named Uachak, which means taking care of in New Chalmers. So incredible collaboration there, and just really cool to be able to put place names to these new areas. And I think you saw some of that like dynamic venting going on there, and a lot of the cool animals. Next up, one of the other big findings is, I was going to tell you about this area before with the seamounts, but it ends up falling under hydrothermal vents, and it's a really weird case. And what this is telling us is that hydrothermal vents really do provide ecosystem services beyond, you know, just the novelty of a really cool deep sea enclosed environment. These have cascading effects in the ocean, and it's the food web. Yes, that's one of the biggest proponents that's been talked about by colleagues as well. But we're going to tell you about a neat habitat that is beyond that. So in the Tuzo-Wilson seamount chain, there's an unnamed seamount, neck depth 58. It will be named by our colleagues, our First Nations colleagues. But I learned something new this year. I had never known, but a seamount can be hydrothermally active. So we went to this seamount to explore a nursery ground, and we noticed some weird staining on some rock and possibly some shimmering water that you were just hearing about. And we put a temperature probe out, and it's warmer than the surrounding seawater. What happens, and I'm going to get, if you're really interested, look up this paper by Winslow and Fisher, because I can't fully explain it myself. But basically, different areas in the ocean have different like porosity, and what can happen is seawater can get entrained in them, and then as they pass deep near the ocean core warms them up, and then they shoot out at other seamounts, or usually or different areas. So we had never discovered this in Canada before this summer, that we have hydrothermally active seamounts. Pretty incredible and shocking discovery. And why that's really important is because we were coming here to look at this skate. This skate is the Pacific white skate. And we had been here another year, and we had been looking in amongst this gorgeous coral garden. So that's what you're seeing here, is these fan corals. And what looks like really weird rocks at the bottom of them. And when you look closer, they're actually skate eggs. So skate eggs, you're going to see some more in a picture. But why this is really important that it's hydrothermally active is these are deep sea animals with like long gestation periods. So their eggs take a long time to go. And by having this warmth coming off the seamount, they're using it almost like an incubator. Isn't that incredible? Coming up from the deep sea onto the summit of this seamount to lay their eggs. It's absolutely incredible. And so this is an ecosystem service beyond just food. It's habitat, complexity, it's warmth. And here's an image of one of these corals when you're looking down at the sediment and the seafloor. And I hope you can see my cursor, but up near the top center, you can see what's called a skate egg, or they call them mermaid purses. I like to describe them as the ravioli with hooks on the end. And babies are basically living in the center of these. And just to give you context, within this image alone, take a second and guess how many you're seeing. I actually forget how many it is right now. I think it's like 19. But this is a 1 by 1 meter, and you're seeing like 19. So this seamount summit is 5 million, or no, yeah, 5 million meters squared. And so even if we just had one skate egg on the summit per meter, and here we're seeing way more, just to give you context of how prolific this site is. And to top it all off, we found caught imagery of a female in the middle of laying an egg. It was absolutely incredible. I'm seeing a question in the chat. How do you actually tell females and males from the same species? Well, I guess if they're laying an egg, you can tell, but usually you don't get that kind of imagery. This was incredible, once in a lifetime discovery. But skates are similar to sharks, and the males and females have different structures. So this is the female laying an egg, and if it was a male, the fins would have something called claspers on them. It's a kind of male sex organ that is on the fins. So yes, absolutely incredible find. This has been discovered one other time in the world in the Galapagos by Salinas de Leon et al. You can look at their paper, but I have to say our discovery is a little bit cooler. They found a couple hundred eggs. We saw thousands, and if our calculation is possible, we could have up to millions of eggs on this thing. We also discovered we did some collections this year, and we found that we have at least 2 species, and we did see another species of skate. We didn't see them in the middle of the lane, but we did see another skate in the area. So the boreal skate is also using this habitat. Our temperature differences were some more extreme. Basically, this is a super amazing find, just incredible. And you don't want to hear me talk about it? Let's go to the video. So much better in the video. It's actually really good you don't have the audio from the vessel, because things were like, oh my gosh, it's happening, whoa, like it was pretty funny. Even though I'm giving you these big feelings and impressions that we're giving and that we're going to be passing up to management, I just wanted to highlight in the hydrothermal vent system alone, there's so much more going on, and we collaborate with so many people either on vessel or from shore. So just highlight, not only are we just going along with this robot and trying to figure things out, but we do collect specimens and we're doing taxonomic work. We have experts, Merlin Best in-house. We work with Verena Tunnicliffe and colleagues from the University of Victoria, and Hugh McIntosh and colleagues from the Royal Deep Sea Museum. Amanda Bates Lab at the University of Victoria and colleagues like Joan are doing functional and diversity analysis. Maronke Harris, I think I saw her on chat, so that's great. Hi, Maronke, actually was on board a vessel and is doing bacteria analysis. So going to these hydrothermal vents, these different areas, the extinct, the active, inactive, and looking at the taxonomy and ecology of these different bacteria and how they're affecting the ecosystem. We also collected bustinids, which are a type of gastropod or snail that live around them. We collected rock samples, the gastropods were for Megan Davies, another university student. Geology samples were from Memorial University, John Jameson and team. We are doing community composition and diversity studies with colleagues from Dalhousie. In-house, we have eDNA, which is when you try and identify animals from the water column based on their DNA. And then ourselves, we actually established these long-term monitoring sites and are creating these like 3D models of them and trying to compare them over time. So lots of detailed science. I'm kind of giving you the pretty pictures today, but I just didn't want you to think that's all we did. So the last habitat we're going to talk about is cold seeps. Cold seeps are a little bit funny. So they got what we call the cold shoulder here in BC or in Canada, in that they didn't get assessed as EPSAs until a little bit later, a couple of years later, 2018. They do meet the criteria of high on at least 3, so they really should be protected or have management measures related to them. And cold seeps are where methane bubbles out of the seafloor, so bubbles on the seafloor. And yeah, since 2018, nothing's been done. So deep sea biology program, stepping up our game, but also it's not just us. We realized that, especially with all our collaborators and different things, but we now have like a project called the Northeast Pacific Deep Exploration Project, and it's to really conquer these large questions in the deep seas, not just us. It's collaboration between our Indigenous partners, Ocean Networks Canada, but as well as some other institutions around the world. So definitely pay attention to that. And we're trying to say we love seeps, but to be honest, we don't know a ton about them. And so even just the past year or two, we've started to really study them. So we're going to show 3 findings that are really causing Canadians to fall in love with cold seeps, and we're hoping to lead to protection and management of them. So the first thing is that the sphere of influence is a lot larger than we thought. So, you know, this is what a typical cold seep was thought to look like. I mean, this in itself is pretty amazing. You can actually see this methane gas coming out of the sea floor. A lot of the animals you're seeing here are those animals that do chemosynthesis or use chemicals to create their life. So that's those bivalves you're seeing. And then you're already seeing other background animals coming in. So like this large king crab is coming in, but it's not just that. So again, incredible work by the program, but also partnering with largely with Natural Resources Canada and Geomar. We've gone from 250 thought methane bubble areas to 1,600 mapped using eco sounders that look for bubbles in the water column. So that's incredible. That map on the left shows now the extent of where we think they are. We're also finding that the plumes are a lot bigger. So these are reaching over like a kilometer. The largest one, it's called the Winona Twins, over a kilometer up in the ocean column, that you can see this signature coming up from all these bubbles. Some people said they could actually sometimes smell methane at the surface. So to think about that methane reaching the surface. And there's another one at, again, about 0.5 kilometer. So this is just huge. And yes, we literally watch these kind of like mapping software tools and go, bubbles, yay, we get really excited. And then we want to protect them, my bubbles. And what we're finding out too by working with geologists, I'm a biologist, so I'm going to explain this really poorly, but basically the fact that we're seeing these signatures in the water column over time, and then the hard structures associated with them, and I'm going to show you them, that some of these ones that are going strong may have been here for tens of thousands of years. And so that's one thing that we've already learned just in the past 2 years. People used to think that cold seeps weren't very long-lived, that they maybe moved around. They do a bit, but the system usually is there for up to tens of thousands of years, some of them in our waters, which is incredible. What you're seeing in this video is also very weird in the sense of we had the first evidence ever that actually some of oil or carbonates are coming up trapped on the methane bubbles at one site near Barkley Canyon in our waters. This is the first time it's been documented in Canada, and this went on for almost or about a kilometer away from our vessel when we found it at a site. And you're seeing this little sheen above the shark as it's moving through the water. These are the oil on the surface from cold seeps. And we actually had an expert aboard the vessel this time who is studying oil spills from vessels. And he said it would never be in the pattern that we were seeing there when we were over signature of a cold seep site. So really crazy implications there. Oops. And other things that we're doing when partnering with some of the geologists is, you know, we bubble them, the rate the bubbles are coming out, the shapes, and this can tell them a lot of things, and they're going to tell us more in the future, but this is what we were collecting this summer. We also collected through a very important tool, how quickly the gas displaces the water. And that's, again, gives you an idea of how much methane is coming out of the Earth's crust. The next big finding that we're finding out from these cold seep sites is that the habitat is way more extensive than we thought. So when this methane bubbles out of the seafloor, there's chemical processes that happen that make carbonate rock. So instead of, you know, that magma formed basaltic rock, we've got carbonate rock in it. What we are just finding is that not only are the seep animals there, so those are those chemosynthetic things. Here you're seeing some white bacterias and the bivalves that do that, but you're also seeing urchins, commercial fish, different things coming in. But as you can see, this mound of rock is extensive. It's huge. It's been forming for thousands of years, and we're finding at many of our sites a lot more extent than we expected. We're also finding that cold seeps can be very variable. So I'm just going to show a few So of all those 1,600 sites, we've only visually sent a camera down on the black ones in the past couple of years. So Neck Depth 56, the Winona Basin, down near Lapers and Barkley, and the Hesquiat Slope. So they're prominent and they're diverse. So up near Hattagly, they actually have something called a mud volcano. It makes almost like a seamount, except for it's made from this methane seeping process, and it essentially shoots sediment from deep in the core as well up and creates mountains that way. Again, these incredible long carbonate ridges that we weren't expecting the extent to which that we're getting. And then we also have on the Hesquiat Slope that's really cool. It doesn't quite classify as a seamount. Again, it would have had to be over 1,000 meters tall, but there's this huge mound and it's got some really neat cascading features that I'll talk to you about. We've also already discovered how vulnerable these are. So we are seeing effects of fishing in the areas. And particularly down in the Barkley Head and La Perouse Bank sites, we went to areas that had really strong signatures of bubbles, but we went expecting to find the carbonate and we weren't really finding them, but we were finding lots of busted up, what looks like rock that could be carbonate. And yeah, just some implications there. And of course, the animals are very important. And I know that's what this group is here for. So some of the weird animals that live at these sites, and I love weird animals. When I call them weird, don't think I don't like them. But we have these worms that have bacteria on them that help them use this environment, and they create these clusters that then have snails that live on them and deposit their eggs, and just incredible. But for our managers, sure, they want to know that, that's cool, but they also want to know this other part. So here we have the chemosynthetic community. But time and time again, we are finding at these sites that we are getting really important associations with commercial fishing animals, biodiversity hotspots, and it just has cascading effects. That's how many fish are in this, this image. And last but not least, at the Hesquiat Slope, it's doing this really weird thing. So you have to have a certain depth, a certain pressure, and a certain temperature. And this methane coming out of the ocean floor actually makes ice. I know that sounds weird, but it has ice. It's really cool. And at this site, it's like causing it to blister up and kind of create these mounds. And then it's mounded itself and it's rolled. And so what we're getting is materials coming up and out and sliding down this little mound. And here's one of these icebergs. This one was about 6 to 10 meters across, and that's like methane ice. And apparently if you poke it, these can sometimes like float around. We didn't poke it, maybe next time we will. And then here's these carbonate bulgers. So you've already seen pictures of carbonate ridges, but these are boulders, so these come up and blister and roll down. And what you're seeing here is what had the most amazing implications for the end of our expedition. So we got to this site, thank you to our colleagues at Natural Resource Canada, who were like, oh, you should go check this out. It had a really neat look to it in the, eco sounder, the bubbles. And we get there and it's a nursery ground for deep sea octopus. So here's one boulder here, and you can see at least 3 females who have laid and are guarding their eggs. This is one of many boulders we saw. We stopped counting at a couple dozen females that we saw. This is a deep sea octopus that comes up from the deep. Again, sometimes in the deep ocean, there's not a lot of hard substrate. And as you know, a lot of octopuses like to lay eggs on hard things and kind of use cave-like surfaces. And so we've discovered a nursery ground again for a deep sea octopus. And when you zoomed in, you could actually see sometimes the eyes of the babies as they're developing. This is particularly fascinating because a study from Monterey Bay has determined that this species of octopus actually guards its eggs for up to 4.5 years. So these babies were probably coming close to the end of that gestation period. And we ended up capturing the hearts of many people because we encountered a female that was very clearly near the end of it. She was losing her color. Her skin was sagging. When you zoomed in on the eyes, or on the egg cases, you could really see the eyes. And these king crab were just waiting for her. And it was heartbreaking. We had people being like, you need to collect crabs all of a sudden. Anyway, it captured our hearts because what connects us more to the deep sea than understanding, the cycle of life and the protection and wanting your babies to carry on. I can't actually show you the video because it's so captivating, but it's heartbreaking. But when we left, the mom actually had punched away the crabs a couple times. And we left and we came back at the end of the dive and she was still there. And one of the crabs had moved on and she was still doing her job. And another evidence that we have that this is a successful nursery ground is further away on the slope. We came across kind of a more muddy area and we came across a bunch of babies. So really successful, cool nursery ground that we totally weren't expecting it and had never seen before. And that cold shoulder, this story took off. So who cares about deep sea cold seeps? Everybody should know. It's so cool. It really did. It took off. It was really great. We actually made tabloids somewhere. We were beside some sort of alien mother on one thing. And anyway, it was really cool. Jason Momoa has used our footage for, defending the deep sea. And we're hoping that this translates that like this connection that people are feeling to the deep sea really does connect people to, what we're doing and what we're trying to protect, because people only protect what they love and what they know. So implications for cold seeps, what do we want to tell the public? They can have a really profound influence on our ocean and our climate and the biogeochemical cycling that we have going on our coast. And I think we need to start paying more attention to it. And our research ongoing with our colleagues is really proving that. They really are creating a lot more prominent habitats than people had previously thought. So this is really important for habitat and trophic support for our supporting surfaces in our oceans. And cold seeps are home to animals that we love, either for food or for existence value. Again, that intrinsic connection to something defending its young. And in case I missed anything, here's our wrap-up video. And I hope you enjoy.
The 2023 Northeast Pacific Deep Sea Expedition has come to a close after 2 weeks working in and around the proposed Tungwan-Hutchquikuk Sea Geese Marine Protected Area. Our expedition was unprecedented. The discoveries we made and our personal encounters with deep sea animals have left us speechless. In collaboration with multiple nations and other scientists, we checked off a long list of objectives and collected data that will be used to inform research and marine conservation planning. With the help of ROPOS, a state-of-the-art remotely operated vehicle, we visited an array of amazing deep-sea ecosystems. The imagery we obtained with the help of ROPOS is immaculate and allowed us to capture behaviors and ecosystems that have never been seen before. We returned to Explorer Seamount to survey long-term monitoring sites. We took ROPOS on a circumnavigation of the peak to answer questions about the distribution of corals and sponges and how they may be influenced by current flow. 21 years after they were last explored, we investigated the hydrothermal vents at Explorer Ridge. ROPOS captured images of shimmering water and black smoking chimneys covered in tuberums and bacterial mats. We gathered important data to support ongoing research, providing evidence of a dynamic system with new areas of active venting, inactive vent sites, and newly classified extinct chimneys. We returned to NEPDET 58 in the Tuzo-Wilson Seamount chain to gather more imagery at the skate nursery that we discovered in 2019. We obtained the first ever live footage of a Pacific white skate in the midst of laying an egg, and we now have evidence that more than one species of skate utilized this nursery ground. We were stunned to also discover the evidence of hydrothermal venting on the seamount, providing warmer water to the depths, likely aiding in the successful gestation of the skate eggs. Guided by collaborators on land, we ventured to the Winona Basin cold seeps. The ship's echo sounder displayed a plume of bubbles rising 1 kilometer from the seafloor, and gases could be smelled from the deck. On bottom, bubbling gases escaped from the seafloor and large slabs of icy methane hydrates emerged from the sediment. We contributed to ongoing research of cold vent ecosystems by documenting the characteristics of the bubbles and measuring the volume of gas seeping from the seafloor. The amazing capabilities of ROPOS allowed us to complete our deepest dive to date, taking us to an astonishing 3,200 meters. Our taxonomists were ecstatic as we encountered and collected rare and potentially undescribed species. We ended our journey at the Heshkwit Slope Cold Seep Field, where we stumbled upon a garden of female octopuses sitting on their eggs. At each site, oceanographic sampling complemented the bottom-focused work of our expedition. Biological and chemical oceanographic properties of the entire water column were measured to complete the story of the deep sea ecosystems and the body of water that surrounds them. Our research was broadcast to a global audience as we hosted live outreach events from the ship and live streamed all of our dives around the world. Outreach events were hosted cooperatively by our partner nations, collaborators, and the at-sea science team. This expedition was a UN Ocean Decade endorsed activity and will contribute to our global understanding of the deep through the Challenger 150 initiative.
Oops. So I just want to highlight at the end of that video, it did say, and I hope next year you can join us all. We do live stream our dives, and we so anyone can follow along with us during the day. And then we also do targeted like outreach events at night. If you want to come chat with the scientists. And a really cool partnership with all of our First Nations communities is that we will connect to the classrooms and to any events that are happening with them. And we've also done Canada-wide school events as well, which this year was our best attended one. I just want to say a huge shout out to, this is the team that was on the vessel this year, the science team. Of course, we were supported by the Coast Guard vessel staff and the ROV ROPOS team as well. Particularly Cherise Dupree is my boss and the leader of the expedition, and Tammy Norgard is our boss as well. So she's been leading us for quite some time. And then everyone else has had a really key role, and I'm definitely not presenting just my work. And we had so many collaborators on shore as well. So I think I took up enough time. Thank you so much, everyone, for paying attention. I guess because I'm the host, I will say you are welcome to ask questions if you'd like. If you want to turn on your cameras, you're welcome. Or if you don't, yeah, I'll give everyone a moment. So if anybody wants to ask a question, you can you have a mute button on the bottom left. You can unmute that, and you can also turn on your video if you want. You can click on that, or if you don't want to, you can write in the chat if you'd like to just kind of stay silent. I don't mind that as much at all. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? I see Adolf Seska.
Yes, I remember the genus name of glass spongy, which was Velella. Does it tell you anything?
Which one, sorry?
Velella.
Velella? Ooh, the Velella I'm thinking of are the ones that the little jellies that are on the shore. Maybe I'm just thinking of the pronunciation wrong. But glass sponges, we definitely have an incredible diversity. And the one amazing thing about the deep sea is that every time we go down, we collect specimens, they often turn out to be new species to science. So Dr. Henry Reiswig just passed recently, but he was at the Royal BC Museum and he was a world expert, and he has described so many cool species from our waters. So I apologize if I'm not recognizing Velella, but it's possible it was a new species and it's around, and yeah.
I think Velella.
Sorry. I have it from the Brems Tierleben, which means it was a Bible for Central European
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
animal thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Philip, did you say something there?
Oh, I was just gonna say Valella is the by the wind sailor that floats on the surface and has a little sail.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Sorry, I messed it up.
No, that,
This is similar, but I will find it and
yeah.
I will correct myself. Thanks.
That's okay. I'm gonna put my email in the chat, and if you do have any questions about like a specific species or something like that, and we don't get to it today, you feel free to email me. I also work with experts if I don't know the answer, which is convenient. Oops, I just did an extra period there. Let's delete that. Okay. Yeah.
Dawn here. I'm using my wife's computer. It's because I
No
tried
worries.
to get a TV and screen share there to get it on the big screen, which worked intermittently. I'm wondering with the sea mining potential for that, and there seems to be a big push on that at the moment by a Canadian-based firm, actually.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I mean, we know so little about the deep sea. And what you're bringing up or discovering down there is quite remarkable. Should be opening up some eyes. And I'm wondering if who you're sharing this with, and I know you're sharing it broadly, but if they're specifically towards any UN agencies or any of the agencies that may be involved internationally with the approval of these possible permits for deep sea mining.
Yeah, that's a really great point to bring up. So we provide science advice internally to Canada, and basically there's no mining within Canadian waters. They've said that. But just recently, the Canadian government, before they hadn't really taken a stance, and they've called for a moratorium until more research can be done on deep sea mining. There's different levels of what governments are agreeing to around the world. Some are saying go ahead. Some are saying do a moratorium until more research can be done, and some are saying like we should never mine the deep sea. So Canada did finally make a stance very, very recently that they would like a moratorium. But specifically, my boss is superhuman and she works all the time. So kind of as a like side job, she contributes to the International Seabed Authority, and as well as we're both members of the Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative, and we're trying to push out our research through those international channels as well. So, for example, the International Seabed Authority, that's who has all the regulations and jurisdiction, or not jurisdiction, but is controlling what's going to happen with deep sea mining. They're going to have meetings where they make some big choices soon, and Canada will send a delegation. Whether or not our science team is on it, we don't know yet, but we are trying to provide international advice. Yes. And you're very right. Like, I just want to highlight that the story that's spun around the world is that we need the deep sea for smart technologies. That's not necessarily true. There's other ways we could be doing this. There's engineers love a good problem, but it's that cascading effect of like, we just are working towards mapping 30% of our ocean, like knowing what the contours are by 2030. That's a global initiative. We're going to hit it. It's exciting. But less than 5% has been visually surveyed, like sending down these robots, seeing the animals, doing all that. So there's so much, like we know more about the surface of Mars than we do the deep ocean. Like, it's incredible. And so the cascading effects of the mining is not just the destruction at the site. They also want to pump like the tailings, the effluent into the water column. And we do not know the cascading effects of that. So like Canada's stance is like, until we can at least start to do some of this research, we shouldn't even consider it. And not because of some hippie people wanting to protect animals, but we already know our climate's in trouble, and this could have cascading catastrophic. Anyway, yeah, I'm not pro deep sea mining until we do more research and figure things out. Yeah. I gave a talk last year and I didn't want to overlap too much, but I had a big slide on deep sea mining, and these machines are huge. So yeah, thank you for your question. Hopefully I answered it and didn't ramble too long.
No, thanks very much. Appreciate that, and appreciate the efforts that you're making, reaching out to all those bodies that hopefully someone will listen to.
Hopefully, yeah. Yeah.
So
I think, oh, go ahead. Go
Okay,
ahead.
we hear once in a while, as well as Dawn again, of fishermen who are dragging the sea bottoms and pulling up, especially the bubbling, bits of ice and whatnot with the methane loaded ice on and things and bubbling. I've heard of that over back on the East Coast as well as here. And you've had some of your equipment down there damaged by trawlers. And I'm wondering how much activity there still is out there of deep sea trawlers dragging their gear on the bottom of the ocean, trying to pick up crabs, whatever else that they're looking for.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it depends on the area. So the research that we're doing into cold seeps is very timely, because we do like even management side is talking about like, where do we protect, where do we go, what's the more important ones, or are they all the same? And that's why we're trying to do this. Certain areas are hit more than others. So trawling, for example, happens a lot near the Barkley Canyon and La Perouse Bank, those large flat areas, whereas the traps and pots and long lines kind of more on the coast, it's like a bit different fishing. So it's going to be definitely, we provide the science advice to management, and then they look at areas where it overlaps and whether or not they can, what advice they can provide to fishers, or what shifts they can make for fishers and all that sort of thing. So I don't get directly involved in the management, but we provide the science advice saying like, here's where we're seeing destruction, here's where we thought the habitat would be, here's how diverse the habitats are and important to protect, here's what to look for, and then we try to provide maps of where we're seeing, you know, the densest amount of bubbles and all those sorts of things. But yeah, the DFO is very strange in the sense of the two are very separated, and I didn't know that before, you know, a long time working there, but there's very much a science advice, and then we give it over to the other half who does the management and policy, and they can choose what to do with it. And it's interesting. It's good in a lot of ways, but it also has some detriments at times. But yes, there's definitely still fishing going on out there, and recent and heavy, and
Does anybody have any idea how long it would take an area to recover back to its pre-disturbance state after it's been dragged?
Not really, no. We will be looking at that in a bit more detail and working with our geological colleagues. So for example, that really massive bridge that I described, that was like kilometers long. That was a lot more than we were expecting. He figured that that had taken tens of thousands of years to form that large ridge. And then when we went to this one area where it had been hit hard by trawlers, it was completely destroyed, but we could see chunks of carbonate. So that could have been thousands of years of habitat destroyed, or it could have been recent, but we haven't had the opportunity to look at, you know, how quick that happens. They do have some estimates based on, you know, the chemical processes and stuff like that, but because we don't know what it looked like before, it's really hard to say what recovery looks like for that. But yeah, we're looking at thousands of years for the really big hard carbonate structures. The methane steeps, the bubbles themselves, they turn on and off within a daily cycle. They will come back and they will keep seeping. It's just kind of whether the animals and habitat around them can grow up.
Yeah, that's what I'm more or less focused on, is what the biological features are of the critters that are down there, how long it takes for them to repopulate an area, or
Yeah, so the bacteria can be quite quick, actually. And it depends on how much of the area is hit and kind of where the seed populations are, if you get what I mean, like how close a non-damaged is. And bacteria can be really quick and move in. And then you've got the bivalves and the other things. But what has the really biggest cascading effect for the biological community and for biodiversity is when it's had the time to make the hard structures as well. That's when we find a lot of like commercial fishing commercial fish and background species, and things like the corals and sponges like to grow on hard substrates, and that's when we start to see the extra diversity. But you're right, like bacteria can move in relatively quickly.
Thank you very much.
We are getting a little bit late, but I'm just going to check. I think there was one question. Any idea how much methane is being released into the atmosphere by cold seeps? So that's part of one of those studies that we were seeing with the bubbles and the checkerboard. So I'm a biologist and my team directly is biologists, but we are working with geologists who are studying this, and actually some climate change impact colleagues that they have as well, because a lot of time that what we've known about these cold seeps is from using sonar equipment. So sonar on the boats, it's just like what you think of like a bat. They send out a sound, it bounces off things, it comes back and it creates a maps. So most of our cold seep habitat is known from that. And what they actually really wanted to partner with us with is like, okay, if we send you to where we're seeing these bubble habitats, what do we actually see in the water column? How big are these? Are we getting the methane gas, or are the methane ice and that sort of thing? And so we are contributing to that science, and I do not currently know how much is being released into the atmosphere. But the one seep where it's hitting the surface pretty much, like it was over a kilometer, and we could sometimes smell methane. That does have implications, because right now methane in the deep sea is thought to dissipate down there and be like not contributing to greenhouse gases. But if we have cold seeps reaching the surface, that's crazy. That's definitely going to affect the budget, and something to think about. And where else could that be happening in the world, and what are we not buffering for? So I'm afraid I don't have the answers, but we're trying to help people get the answers, is the long and short of it. I'm reading a lot of nice messages. Thank you so much, everybody. I don't think I see any more questions. If I've missed anything, please feel free to type it again or raise your hand or anything like that. All right, well, you're all stuck with me. I'm the new marine host. I will be for at least this year, see how it goes. Come back next month. So usually the deep sea, or sorry, not the deep sea, the marine talks are the last Monday of the month. And we've got Matthias Herborg, and he is talking about marine oil spills and kind of the science talk that goes from it. And I work with Matthias, and it's actually really neat. So he's like our emergency response coordinator when there are large spills or when there are large emergencies. For example, containers falling off of barges and that sort of thing. And he's going to talk about what science advice, what animals he looks at, how it's approached from Fisheries and Oceans perspective, and how he handles that. So, yes.
Great, thanks very much, Heidi.
Yeah.
Well done.
Thank you.
Great nights in good hands.
Oh, good. Thank you again for all your time over the years. It's been fantastic. And not only that, he was president of the board, and wow, Phil, thank you. Yeah.
And yes, I'm just gradually withdrawing.
But you're still going to come to all the talks, which I love.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and we're actually still making Phil look at echinoderms, so sea stars and sea cucumbers and all that stuff that we collect from the deep sea. So don't
Yeah.
worry, he's
So
not.
Is there another batch at the museum, or?
It's about to be delivered, so
Ah,
we'll be in contact. Yeah, and we
Right.
went to close to 3,000 meters this time, so some weird ones.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good.
Okay.
Okay, I'll sign off. Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
again.
you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.